Hello guys, welcome back to Audible Odyssey. So let's step into a world of immersive storytelling where gripping tales of mystery, horror and adventure come to life. Each narration is crafted to pull you into the heart of the story, creating an unforgettable audio experience. From spine-tingling horrors to timeless classics, Audible Odyssey Adventures is your gateway to thrilling journeys beyond imagination. Subscribe now, and let the stories take you to places you've never dreamed of. Audible Odyssey Presents. It was supposed to be such an uneventful day, but overhead the clouds churned and plotted. Rebecca Madison saw and she heard the roaring of the wind against her car, but she didn't care. It was warm inside. So what did the fierce cold outside have to do with her? It didn't matter. There were only two things that mattered to Rebecca in that moment. The first was the clock and the numbers on it. 7:46 it read. It was 7:46 on a Monday morning, and she needed to be at her desk at MC, a pneumatics manufacturer, by 8 a.m. Her drive had another 15 minutes to go at least, and that was hoping against all odds that she could hit every green light. She knew that wouldn't happen, but she didn't worry about it just yet. She was still far in the country. The road before and behind her was empty. She accelerated from 65 to 70 miles per hour. She worked relations, and not glamorous, but it was all she had, and she was damn good at it. Lately, however, she'd been pushing her luck. She'd made arriving late a bad habit. Well, it's easy when it's never. Noticed it wasn't consistent, not every day, but at least twice a week she slipped in under the bell. The game had changed when her supervisor noticed, and since their little talk last week everything got more complicated. Everything was too complicated as of late. That was thanks majorly to her other concern back home. Her mother. Rebecca had never married. She lived alone for many years, and that was perfect. She thought it'd be no hassle at all. When she asked her mother to move in with her, it was right after her father died, and she couldn't bear the thought of her mother alone with no home besides hers. As the years went by, she started to wonder if it had been worth it. Her mother was nearing an impressive 95 years of age come next April, was still a very smart woman. Rebecca saw that every morning. The only issue was that her mother could no longer retain that spark. Her mother had fallen prey to sundown A syndrome. Every morning her mother was still the woman she remembered in the folds in her face, but come night the very sight of her was more than disheartening. It was nearly unbearable. Rebecca didn't want to use the word, but it was an annoyance. That's why Rebecca always ran so late. She enjoyed seeing her mother in the morning, dreading the state she'd come home to find her in, and there was so much to manage. She had to lock her doors and hide her keys so she wouldn't wander outside. There were so many medications. She had to help her to the bathroom and get her dressed. She promised she'd never put her in her home, and now that promise was more solidified than ever. Rebecca knew that she would never see her mom in the mornings again if she had to do that. It was hard, but they both did their best. She was determined to do so for as long as they had left. The thought came to her that morning, as it did every morning, she should call her mother and talk to her just for a little bit longer before the day ruined her. That's all she'd need. Her mother didn't need to be physically strong to help lift the weight of depression from her shoulders, but as she reached for her purse, she realized that her phone had never left the bedside that morning. It was neglected in her panic to get out of the door. It made her eyes tear up with frustration rather than sadness. All she could do was sit in the white noise of the radio and watch the endless fields of dead corn roll. She pushed the speed again up to 75, but the radio came to the forefront of her mind. Her ear clung to it out of the blue, but honestly, she didn't hear it. The radio sat stiller, unsure of the scope of the event. All that's known at this time is that the Chinese government has declared a state of national emergency. At the moment, China has released no official details of the events that have transpired over the last 24 hours, and they've ignored all of the UN's offers to assist them. No sources yet have been able to confirm any further details, as communication with the troubled nation has grown difficult, with many intelligence satellites showing major power outages within the nation's borders, and enough rumors, however, have started circulating around that Stretched from incredibly believable to the utterly improbable. While the intelligence community has flat denied a majority of these rumors, it's hard not to notice that a lot of them sound incredibly similar to ones that started circulating just last week about Somalia, where Rebecca turned the radio from AM to FM. She was in no mood for news that morning. She preferred music. She allowed herself to get lost in it. The country song fit to her surroundings like a puzzle piece. A silo grew closer on her right hand side of a picturesque farmhouse nestled right beside it, and on the left she spotted an older blue pickup coming towards her carrying a horse trailer. The sights of Ohio. She felt much younger, and that's all she wanted. The moment was so perfect that it perfectly distracted her from the red raccoon-sized mass that landed on the road ahead with a loud bang. Her tire had been shredded only once before. Rebecca felt a tire blow, and she'd been 7 at the time. Her father was at the wheel. She remembered how calmly he handled it. He gritted his teeth and willed the truck to stay on the road. He tensed up but handled it perfectly. That's the only way he could do things. She wished he'd passed that on to her. She screamed, and instinctively she jerked the wheel to the right. The car skidded and hit gravel. She overcorrected again, just barely managing to save her car from sliding into the ditch that hugged the side of the road. The car skidded into the oncoming lane, spit to face the way she'd just come from. As she slammed on the brakes, she gritted her teeth expecting more, but mercifully her car came to stop without further incident. Everything came to a stop except for her heart. It was pounding faster than it had in nearly 5 years. She remembered the truck, but about 10 seconds too late had it still been an issue. Fortunately, it was no longer an issue. The man driving the truck had managed to stop about 2 car lengths away. He was already on foot, and he was almost to her door. The knock of his knuckle on the glass brought her back to reality. "Hey miss," he asked, concerned. "You all right?" She eyed the older man. He was thin as a twig with a bushy mustache and a sun-dried face. His eyes squinted down at her as she nodded her head in affirmation. He nodded his back. "My phone's in the truck. Hold tight, I'll be right back with that." He turned and hustled back to his truck's cab. As he searched, she relieved herself of her seat belt. She felt like she'd been punched in the chest by a gorilla. Her head was heavy. She realized she was dizzy. As she took that first step out of the car, it was like she was walking on jelly, gripping the door with white knuckles. She fought against the fierce wind. It threatened to at least knock her on her behind, if not carry her away altogether. She closed her eyes, held on, and took several deep breaths. It would have helped to calm her down a great deal, had the old farmer not accidentally startled her when he returned. He must have seen it in her eyes, because he quickly apologized. "Sorry, you sure you're okay?" "Yes," she said, trying to convince herself more than him. "I'm fine, are you okay?" "I'm so sorry I spook your horses. I stopped in plenty of time, and it's an empty trailer. Horses are about 10 miles down the road. It's okay if your tire blows out." She wasn't too sure everything was still spinning. "I think so. Damn, I hope not, though I don't have a spare." "It's okay, miss," the farmer chuckled as he put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Everything's going to be just fine. Let's go check out the damage." He was very kind to her. The farmer cautiously and sportively guided her by the arm, making sure to correct her every sway. They took their time as they moved around the front of the car. Sure enough, when they reached the right front wheel, there was almost nothing left on the rim. The rubber had been shredded. It looked like she'd driven it over a field of razor wire for you. The farmer said, "Yep, your tire has seen some better days." I reckon. Shaking her head in disbelief, Rebecca felt like vomiting. The wind continued to assault her face with a frigid, ungodly cold. The farmer didn't seem to mind it, as his focus was back down the road, towards the rest of her. We should go clear that off the road, he said. She begrudgingly went along. It had nothing to do with him. She just wanted to be inside the warm embrace of her car's heater again. The damn marshmallow of a coat she was wearing didn't do a thing to help. She took out the fuzzy black gloves she kept in her pocket and slipped them over her hands. The warmth didn't come fast enough for comfort. Comfort, knowing that now she had an excuse for being late that should have taken a load off, but she realized that she'd have to prove it, a situation made difficult by her lack of a phone. Hey, thanks for your help, mister. She intentionally trailed off, hoping he'd fill in the blank. Sanders. He replied, Phil Sanders. It's absolutely no problem at all, Miss Madison. Rebecca Madison, she said, shivering. Does your phone have a camera? By any chance? He eyed her and smirked. He held up a black smartphone. Just because I'm old doesn't mean that I am not sorry, she interjected, chuckling with him. I didn't mean anything by it. Just gives you a hard time. Mississippi. What about the camera? I left my phone at home. Another wind struck her and shook her. I was wondering if you could help me out and take some pictures, for the boss. I hear you. I think we'll be able to come to an agreement. They were almost the remains of her. The tattered remains sat about 50 yards away from where her gray Civic had stopped. The rubber had peeled right off the rim, the tread still face down, and the torn strands of rubber curled upwards, like a flower petal. Looks like it stuck on the landing, Phil said, eyeing the rubber. He bent downwards and gripped either side of the strip. He tried to stand up on it, but he couldn't lift it. Both ends came up, but the middle held fast to the road like it was glued there. With a huff, he tried again. What in the world? He asked on the third attempt. Grunting hard, he scoffed, My God, what did you hit? I've got no idea, Rebecca said, hugging her chest. I didn't see anything. 1 second, the tie was there, and then the next it wasn't. She hesitated as Phil tried for a fourth time because she saw something under the rubber. She only got a peek, but she could see it was red. Held on, she said. It looks like it's stuck on something. Stuck? What do you mean stuck on what? Superglue? He chuckled. Rebecca looked both ways, checking for traffic with the coast still clear. She urged Mr. Sanders to try again. When he did so, she saw the red mass again. It looked like a giant piece of bubble gum. At first, she was dumbfounded and she got on her knees. It's stuck on something. Gooey, you say? Phil put the rubber back down and got on his knees with Rebecca's. He shined his phone's flashlight under the rubber. There certainly was a gooey mass stuck to the tire, and it was wet and strong. The wind carried its stench right into Rebecca's nose, and the vomit she'd been holding down almost came. The smell was thick and hot. It was the smell of rot. Looked like you had hit or something, Phil said, backing away. Goddamn fresh one too. That's weird, though. With the tire, I don't know why it stuck to him. I had never seen anything like it before. I haven't either. She put her right hand over her mouth. I didn't see any fur on it. It just looked like meat. Yeah. If you hit them hard enough, that's what they'll look like. I'm going to go ahead and call the state boys in real fast. We're going to need someone a little younger than both of us to take care of this mess. If you know what I mean. With a smile, he escorted her back to her car. He continued talking as he dialed on his phone. I also think we should get some EMTs out here and check on you. No thanks, I'm fine, she said, grinning to assure him she didn't want the hassle. I think the state boys will want it too. Might as well just ask now and get everyone here at once, he said, trying to coax her. Maybe, but I'm telling you I'm fine, just a bit dizzy. You want to make the call, he offered. I'll let you decide. I don't want to speak to you one way or another. He smiled and handed her the phone, which she took hesitantly. Thanks, she said, as she took the phone. No problem. Now let's see what we can do about that tire first? I think I may have a jack in my. His question was cut off by a loud thud that came from her car. On her now dented hood sat a large bulbous mass the size of a college teacher book. Whatever it was held the same consistency as the thing she'd hit with her tire. Given a clear look at it, it looked as though it had been chewed up and spat out. Rebecca looked up and saw nothing but clouds. She didn't know what she expected to see, but she'd hoped for some clue. The thing didn't just fall out of the sky. It couldn't have. What in God's name? Phil asked, moving towards it. He could only get so close before he had to pull his undershirt up over his nose. Was that there before? Rebecca asked, trying to rationalize the blob's presence. I don't think so. I think it just fell onto your car. But where did it come from? God, it reeked. Step by step Rebecca brought herself closer to the appalling mass. Her stomach churned faster than the angry clouds above. Whatever it was, whatever it used to be, there was no evidence of it. Now it resembled nothing natural that she could think of. It was just a figure's blob. A red stream of liquid ran off of it, slowly dripping down the hood of the car. She pushed the notion it could be blood from her head. Blood from what? That wasn't meat. Was it? The only part that was then blood red stuck out of the top like a spine. It was small, white, and whereas the rest of the mass seemed soft to the touch, this part was obviously solid. When she got closer, Rebecca saw it was split into two white prongs. Rebecca took a step back when her mind gave the protrusion a name. That is a tooth, she asked. Even though she was confident in her assessment, she didn't know what the blob was, but the protrusion was very obviously the root of a tooth, possibly a human tooth. Phil didn't have a chance to answer before she finally let loose, her stomach on the black asphalt. She proceeded to collapse beside it, her head spinning and pounding. It can't be, Phil said, his voice shockingly less playful than it had been. That's not. There was another thud. This time, it came from the fields. It was accompanied by a sickening crunch. Rebecca didn't want to see it, but she did. Dead stalks were flung into the air above it. Then, before the stalk settled, another blob dropped beside it with the husks of corn. Pieces of cornstalk stuck to its sides and held fast. The mass rolled and jiggled, recovering from the force of the impact. More followed. Another piece fell behind them. This time it struck nearly 200 yd from the road. Before that one had even settled, another one hit the road behind Phil's truck. Rebecca had watched as that piece fell straight down from the sky above the arch. It hadn't been thrown, it had been dropped. Another piece reached the row of barren trees beyond the fields to her left. The weight of the blob snapped the higher branches. She couldn't see where it landed, if it landed at all. One struck the top of the silo, causing it to ring loudly, the sound echoing inside the structure. The piece stayed there, holding onto the top of the silo. With ease it stuck like glue. Rebecca looked up to the sky overhead as the clouds swirled and fought. The blobs fell from somewhere beyond them. They started as black ink drops against the gray skyline, but as they plummeted they took on color and grew into the disgusting blobs that now littered the landscape all around them. The drops came faster and faster. The sheer horror struck Rebecca as a piece fell not 1 yard from her hand. A warm red liquid splattered across her face. The sky was raining flesh. Get up, Phil said, also looking at the sky with caution and disgust. He turned back to Rebecca. Miss Madison, please get up now, you need to get in your car before. As if out of pure cosmic irony, a large chunk of flesh almost the size of a pillow struck Mr. Sanders on his right shoulder. The impact yanked him towards the ground, but he took the hit miraculously. He managed to stay on his feet. That didn't stop him from screaming. Oh my God, Rebecca exclaimed, quickly getting to her feet and rushing over to his side. The thing was still stuck to his arm. The unholy thing had molded itself around his shoulder and arm. It formed a grotesque cast, pinning his arm to his side. Extensions from the impact had splattered out to stick to his face and chest. He wheezed in pain. I think it broke my damn shoulder. I get it off, please get it off, he begged her. Yeah, hold on, Rebecca said, watching the sky. With every second the rain of flesh fell faster, heavier. With every second she felt increasingly uncomfortable, increasingly terrified that the next one would strike her next the top her head. She pictured it wrapping around her face and smothering her in rotted darkness she turned her attention to the injured old man putting his phone into his pocket. She reached slowly for the disgusting mass stuck like a leech to his shoulder. She forced her gloved hands onto the thing and she gripped it tight. As she did so, her fingers slowly started to sink inwards. She winced as an unwelcome warmth soaked into her glasses gloves. Mr. Sanders brought his other hand up to help it sunk in deep. She took a deep breath, inhaling an unfortunate amount of stench, and gave it a good pull. She managed to yank him forward, but the mass didn't budge. It was stuck to him like glue. With another tug, she realized her hands were stuck there too hard. Phil lewd, through the pain, pulled it hard. "My hands," Rebecca said. Panicked, "My hands are stuck." Just once she tried to wriggle her fingers free, but they were stuck inside the blob. She tried again. This time she pulled with all she had, but all she did was pull Mr. Sanders off his feet. He struck the asphalt hard and she nearly fell with him. They'd accomplished nothing. He grimaced and tears started to flow down his face as she pulled him back up. Rebecca saw it wasn't working, so she set about trying to free herself. She didn't want to, but her survival instincts were in full gear. They couldn't waste another second outside. She struggled, twisted and pulled, but the revolting thing was held faster than anything she'd ever seen. She tried pulling with her left hand and she pushed with her right. Her left glove gave and part of her hand came free. She then realized she could just pull her hands out of her gloves. "Please try again," Mr. Sanders asked. In a pitiful voice, he could barely keep his eyes open. His shoulder was dislocated at the very least, and she knew there was nothing she could do alone to pull that mass off his arm. All that mattered now for both of them was that they find cover quickly. She fought against the gloves to free her hands. The pounding of the rain grew faster and heavier. Another piece hit her car right on top of the cab. 3 struck Mr. Sanders' truck. All of them were far too close for comfort. Mr. Sanders didn't realize what Rebecca was doing until it was too late. "No," he shook his head. "No, please don't. Please try again. Please, it stings, it stings." She ripped her hands free of the gloves with a grunt just as a chunk smacked against her windshield. It was the size of a car tire. "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do right now. We need to get to cover, get back to our truck and stay there until this is over." She didn't hesitate to turn around and open her door, but Mr. Sanders could only stumble backwards with a limp. He started to pull himself towards his truck, groaning. He watched the sky through his watery eyes. Scared, Rebecca slammed her door shut just as another pounding thud came from the roof. She yelled and she fumbled for her keys. They were in her pocket. That was good, but then she felt something else, a phone. She pulled it out and looked out her rearview mirror. Outside, everything was consumed by a downpour of flesh, and there was Mr. Sanders limping through. It was by the grace of God that he got as far as he did. He almost managed to reach the door of his truck. He could have touched it. A smaller drop of flesh the size of a book hit his left foot and glued it to the spot. Rebecca could only watch as he stumbled and fell hard to the ground in front. He could only lie there at the mercy of the sky above. She tried to see him out of her rear window, but so many drops had accumulated it was impossible. She could only watch the terrible scene unfold in her side mirror. He looked hopeless. The pounding of the rain drowned out any sound, but she saw his head moving. He was yelling for help. A large chunk of flesh struck his back, breaking it. Another pinned his leg all the while. Rebecca never moved. She was safe, and her fear kept her rooted in that seat. Had a glob not swallowed her mirror first, she would have witnessed another drop strike him right on the back of his head, delivering his face quickly into the asphalt below. It was an accidental mercy. She started to hyperventilate. She had no idea what to do. The rain outside just kept coming and coming. In reality, the rain only lasted a few minutes, but it seemed so much longer. It seemed like it stretched on for hours on end. For that seeming stretch of forever, all Rebecca could do was scream. She moved to the back seat away from her cracking windshield and brought her legs close to her chest. She hugged herself as the heavy rain fell over her, consumed her. Soon the drops would cover every inch of her car and the windows. They eat the light. She was left alone in the darkness. Long after the barrage outside had ceased, Rebecca cried in the darkness. Thankfully the windows had held back the physical barrage, but they couldn't hold back the stench that had flooded inside almost instantly. It threatened to suffocate her. Then she didn't even notice it anymore. Eventually, Rebecca was able to move her arms and her feet and her legs, but she didn't want to. The car had protected her, but Rebecca still felt unequivocally surrounded like a child under the sheets. She didn't want to let one single limb hang free. The monsters might get it. The darkness wasn't total. A dim glow precipitated between the masses outside. Red lights managed to leak through the edges of the blobs where pieces met the jagged lines that covered her car like lightning. It did her no good. Not nearly enough light could seep through to offer her any illumination. When she couldn't handle the weight of the darkness anymore, she reached for Mr. Sanders' phone, which lay face down on the center console. She fumbled for it and accidentally knocked it on the floor. Light flooded out from within. It was blinding but welcome. After giving her eyes time to adjust, she searched for the flashlight. She was so thankful that the phone had stayed unlocked. She found it and the entire car was illuminated. She wasn't ready for what she saw. A claustrophobic paralysis found her as she beheld the thing stuck to her car pressed tightly against the glass. The thing seemed to embrace her. Most of the glass had held except for her rear window. It had nearly shattered, but every crack and the shard was held fast in place by the revolting masses. They didn't move. They hugged her car in silent stillness. Rebecca recalled the tale of Jonah and the whale, and she imagined that this was how Jonah felt. She'd been swallowed alive. She needed to get out. She flipped over. She hesitated to reach for the door handle. She didn't want to get any closer to those things than she needed to. She pulled, and when she heard the click, she pushed, her whole body pressed up against the door. Her face met the window, but the door didn't budge. The masses outside held the door like glue. They fought against her. It was like trying to move a mountain. Rebecca screamed in protest. She couldn't be trapped in here. No, not in here. Panicking, she shoved him again. She threw her weight into that door time and time again, but it didn't move. It couldn't. She might as well have been trying to beat her way through a concrete wall. After trying every single door, she found that they all held firm. She was truly trapped, and calling for help wasn't an option. She tried 3 times to dial 911 on Phil's phone. No matter where she was in the car, she couldn't get any signal. The mass had drowned out the light and any hope she had of contacting the outside world. It seemed the car was shrinking by the second. In frustration, she lashed out with her feet. She aimed at the window, hoping maybe it would break. Hopefully, things would fall off instead of in if they were stuck without the window. She decided she'd cut her way out. One of the shards had to have been sharp enough. With a forceful thrust, she brought her heel to the window. The only thing she almost managed to break was her leg. As she hyperextended her knee, the pain returned her to her previously curled state. She began to cry and plead for someone to come help her. Her instincts told her that if she screamed, then someone would hear, someone would come along, and help would come. Her heart told her it was a lie, and it was for a while. Soon she grew exhausted and her voice grew high. Not a single sound came from outside her car. The wind had ceased with the rain long ago, and there was nothing, since no birds, no cars, no people. That silence allowed the small crunch outside to be amplified nearly 10. She froze and listened. She thought it had to be her imagination, but as another crunch came and then another, she realized it was real. It was like the sound of someone stepping on dry leaves. Something was definitely moving outside. The crunching approached her car and she heard him say hello. The voice was older and haggard. It sounded muffled through the blobs. Everyone there didn't have to ask her twice. Yes, she screamed, flying to the window. Yes, yes, please help me, please, I can't get out, please. The man came closer to the car. He stopped just outside. You're covered by this stuffs. It is almost impossible to move it. Hold fast, give me a minute. It's starting to dry now. I've got some tools at my house. I'll be right back. Rebecca smiled and thanked God he must have lived in that home next to the silo. It was all okay. Yes, please, thank you, she said almost all at once. The crunches returned faster as the man turned away, relieved. She knew it would be over soon. The day sought to destroy her expectations. Then the crunching stopped. Rebecca put her against the window. Trying to listen, the glass was uncomfortably warm against her face. There was nothing but the roar of her own blood in her ears, then a moan. The moan continued for several seconds before it evolved into a short gag, a gasp. Something had happened to the man. He must have only been 4 or 5 yards from the car. He cursed and grunted. There was a louder crunch that was followed by silence. That silent moment hung in the air and Rebecca pushed harder against the window. She whispered a single hello under her breath, then the moment was shattered by his scream. Rebecca pulled her face from the window as if she'd been burned. She asked panicked, what happened? Are you okay? Hey, are you okay? She was clueless. Had the man fallen? Maybe he'd rolled his ankle and fallen, but could that cause him so much pain? His scream was primal, like a wounded animal, and it ended for a moment. It was just long enough for the man to take a quick breath, and then he continued, the why increasing in volume and pitch. What she pleaded. What is it? Please tell me, are you okay? Talk to me, he did in a raspy, shrill and pained voice, staying in the car. It sounded like he choked on the last syllable as a ghastly gurgled yell came from his lips through his pain cry. Rebecca could only make out so much of what happened next, and I felt it not out of that car. Oh God, no! Then unexpectedly and instantly the screaming ceased. The silence returned and Rebecca shook. Her mind raced and her breathing came in short, fast gasps. Tears warmed her face. No, she couldn't let him leave her. She wouldn't be alone. Again, hey, get up, what's happening, sir? With a determined fury she brought her hand and the butt of the phone to the window pane. That's when it moved almost perfectly with her motion. One of the blobs that embraced her window stirred. The light showed her every gruesome second. The movement was small. A tiny $50-sized section on the bottom split into 2 and peeled itself apart. It was unexpected enough to send Rebecca stumbling backwards. It startled her, then it revolted her. The small section that split open revealed a new structure below it. Small, round and moving, she realized she was looking at an eyeball, a seemingly human eyeball. The thing had opened an eye and was peering into the car through a cloudy blue iris. It looked about for just a moment before it locked its gaze right on her. Rebecca said, as if saying it would change her reality. Horrified, she couldn't break away from the unexpected and unwelcome staring contest. The eye held its gaze and then it blinked. Rebecca wondered what it was thinking. This thing was made of flesh and blood. She couldn't resist its dead stare, offered no clues. Could not think at all. Why was it staring at her? Why had any of this happened? Then, out of the corner of her eye and at the farthest edge of the light reach, she saw another eye had emerged from beneath the pulpy masses. When she shined the light on it, she saw that it too was looking directly at her. It didn't seem possible I could see her once. Brown's cornea now wore a red gash across its surface straight through its pupil. Despite that injury, it followed her perfectly. Matter where in the car she moved, both eyes followed her. Before long, they were everywhere. Every single piece of flesh that fell from the sky and stuck to her car eventually opened an eye, a singular eye, and they all stared down at her. She no longer felt alone. Instead, she felt like a trapped animal, a fox in a trap. The hunters didn't need to make a move, they only needed to watch and wait. She was their prey. Rebecca dropped the phone and the lights died. The car was cast into near total darkness once more. The darkness might have been comforting had she not been so perfectly sure that those eyes were still watching her. She knew the darkness couldn't protect her how much time had passed inside that car. She was unsure if she'd blacked out or if time had simply slipped her by, but when she regained some semblance of sanity it was late in the afternoon. The phone battery is now a measly 15%, showed the time was 4:55. Rebecca should have been home, but instead she was lost and trapped. She needed to be with her mother. It may have been that realization that brought motion back to Rebecca's body from seat to seat and corner to corner. She scrambled, led the phone's energy fell. The clock ticked, but the bars wouldn't return. She couldn't find a goddamn signal. Cautiously, she tilted the screen of her phone to the window. Some light reflected off, but just enough was able to illuminate some of the flesh. Beyond to her relief, her eyes were closed. She made sure to check all of them. Part of her wondered if the eyes had simply been a product of her paranoia. The blobs had reverted to being shapeless, featureless masses, and that was better. With luck, those eyes never existed at all. She wondered if that man outside had been real. Ever since she'd let the darkness retake her, not a single sound besides her own breathing had come along. The unnatural, deathly silence had been heavier than the shadows around her. She was still utterly clueless as to what had happened outside and what the world looked like, how widespread the rain still hadn't reached her yet, and she was doubtful that any ever would. Maybe she'd been quarantined. Surprisingly, she found that idea reassuring. In that case, it meant that at least people were still out there and she'd be taken care of. Eventually. The alternative was far worse. Was it even possible that the rain would have caused a widespread epidemic had it covered the whole country, the world? Rebecca shivered as she remembered China. Something had happened in China and Somalia had the rain hit there too. She cursed herself for turning on the radio. Was she alone, really and truly alone? She'd hoped people were still outside, but what if they'd all suffered like that stranger? Maybe the car protected her, her savior and her captor? She was trapped in her own racing thoughts. Those things brought back memories of her youth. Specifically, she recalled the day her dad hit that poor cat. They were in their old F-150 and the sun was so bright a fat gray cat had just run out onto the road. It was like they were waiting for the truck. It couldn't have timed any better. She still remembered how it felt, the bump as the front wheel struck it. And the bump as the rear wheel finished. Her dad told her not to look. He pulled the truck over so he could go check on it. Rebecca disobeyed and looked out of the back window. All she wanted was a quick peek to make sure the cat was okay. She paid for her morbid curiosity. She recalled Mr. Sanders' words from just a few hours earlier, as she remembered the terrible scene. Aside from its craned head and opened eyes, nothing on it resembled a cat anymore. They'd hit it so hard that it was more red than gray. It was no longer an animal, just meat. You hit them hard enough. That's what they'll all look like. They were all meat, so that's what they had to be, flesh. That seemed the most logical assumption. But so impossible. At the same time, she couldn't bring herself to accept that flesh of what could flesh rain from the sky. It had to come from somewhere, didn't it? She shut that thought, that word away. It sickened her. She thought of those eyes, those very human eyes. Another thought came into being. It took hold like a cancer in her head. The question came, had those things once perhaps been people? No, they weren't. It was too much. It was so much death, so much flesh. It was impossible in every sense. Where would they get all those people? It had to have been millions and millions of people murdered. There are millions in China. She thought maybe something worse than rain happened in China. No, she told herself to stop it. Her thoughts obeyed, trailing off like a bad note. It didn't matter now, she hadn't paid attention. She'd been worried about her own problems. What good did it do her to wonder? Who cares where they came from? Who cares if they're people? She gagged. All that she needed to do was escape. Her mother still needed her. Sweat rolled down her face. The temperature must have only been 30 degrees far outside, yet the car was steadily heating up. Those things were doing it. She was sure they were warm, and the warmth they emitted was conducted directly into the car. Shedding her coat and sweater, she fanned herself with her white sweat-soaked undershirt. She wondered how long it would take for them to cook her alive, if that was possible. Death by rank flesh heat, as she decided to call, it wasn't an option for her, placing the phone on the center console. She moved to the driver's seat. She didn't like it. Those pulps things were far too close when she sat there, but if she let herself roast any longer she wouldn't get to live to regret it. Back at the wheel, she couldn't help but think about driving away. It wasn't a possibility, just a fantasy. With those blobs on the packed windshield blocked her sight, and they also probably held her tires to the ground. She'd never move, and she'd never get anywhere, wondering if perhaps the noise would agitate the things. Rebecca saw their eyes in her mind. It had been hours since then, and the eyes hadn't returned. As if they wanted to hurt her, they would have done so already. Rebecca started the car. The engine turned twice and started. More heat leaked out from the vents in moist, heavy waves. She gagged as the fresh stench overloaded her nose. It would take a moment for the AC to turn on. The radio was silent, as she knew it would be. While she waited, she tried out of curiosity to drive, switching into gear. She eased down onto the gas pedal. The engine picked up in pitch, but the wheels did nothing but flinch. It felt as though she were trying to drive over a curb. She fed it more gas as she figured the car wouldn't move an inch. She cursed the damned wheels and her damned life. A groan came from above her. It wasn't a growl, it wasn't those things. It was her car. The roof of her car was caving in. Something was pressing down on it, on the windows. She saw them twitching. The masses were moving now, reacting to it. Was the car. It had to have been. She'd accidentally woken them up. Cursing her careless mistake, she yanked the key from the console. The car fell silent, but things kept moving. They struggled against each other, wiggling back and forth in their confined spaces. Perhaps they were searching. Rebecca held her breath, and she waited for their motion to start to rock the car from side to side. The thing shook her harder and faster. The lurching continued until Rebecca felt she was going to throw up. The wheel was all she had to hold on to. Fortunately for her, the rocking didn't persist for long. After just a few seconds, everything stopped. The car fell back to rest, and the car retook the air. Rebecca sucked in an exhausted gasp. Reluctantly, she released the steering wheel. But as her eyes watered, she reached for the phone. She'd been tormented enough. Never before had she been so desperate to speak to her mother. Still, there were no bars, no signal. The battery fell to 7%. Her heart was already drained. She fell back into the rear seat, too weak to cry. It was hopeless. She wasn't sure what prompted her to check again, probably in the back seat. Her subconsciously refused her fate. Looking back at the phone, she was shocked it was weak, but finally a connection had been made. A signal, there was a signal. Rebecca wasn't sure if her fingers had ever moved faster in her life. She dialed the number for home. As she held the phone to her face, she didn't know if she could even speak. Her hand was cued over her mouth. No evil in the world held a candle for the next 10 seconds. Every beep hit her harder and cut her deeper than any of those damned monstrosities outside could ever hope to overwhelm. Joy gave way to grief, yet again she could only hope that God, if there was one, wouldn't let her down. That's what her mother would have told her. Her mother always had faith. Rebecca was rewarded for her. A fragile voice came over the phone, weak but alive. "Oh my God," Rebecca gasped. "Mom, is that you? Who is this?" Her mother asked on any other day. That question might have broken her heart, but today it was all Rebecca needed. "Rebecca, Mom, it's Rebecca. Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay." "Of course, dear," she said, unconcerned. "Of course you're Rebecca. Why, yes, I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be?" Rebecca pumped her fist in the air and she kicked her feet several times in furious juvenile joy. The smile that spread on her face was unmatched. Thank the Lord her mother was safe. That meant there was hope. Maybe her nightmare wasn't as widespread as she'd feared. Maybe, just maybe, there's be a chance for her, a chance for everyone. What's happened? What's happening over there? Her mother was confused. Nothing much. There's not much to do here. Someone needs to water the flowers. I should water them. No, Rebecca stated. No, don't go outside. Mother, listen to me. Can you turn on the TV? What does the TV say? You want to talk to Rebecca? Her mother asked. No, Mom, I'm Rebecca. She should be home by now. Rebecca always comes home. I don't. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused. Those words broke her heart. I will be, Mom, I'll be home soon. I promise I'm coming home. She said, Okay, well, be careful. I'm going to water the plants. It's been raining hard today. Rebecca froze. No, it couldn't be. Could it really be that widespread? My home was miles away, but her mom was okay. Perhaps her mom had just been lucky she was inside after all, and as long as those blobs stayed outside she'd be fine. But her flowers, Rebecca knew how she could be in her confused state, and if she was truly determined, then her mother would listen to me. I've never been more serious in my entire life. Do not go outside. I'll do what I want, only Rebecca can be mother. Rebecca wailed, Do not leave the house. The plants don't need water. Just listen to me. Rebecca stopped. If these were the last words she ever spoke to her mother. She didn't want them to be screams. She took a deep breath and begged, Please, Mom, please wait for me. We'll water the plants together. Just wait for me to get home. Okay, her mother said. You get here and then you, Rebecca, and I can go water those flowers. They're going to need it so badly today. I'll be there soon, Mom. The last words choked out. I love you. The line went dead. The phone, hanging on 3%, was about to leave her in darkness, but now she had to move. She had to get out. She'd let Mr. Sanders down and she couldn't help that old man. She refused to let anyone else die, not herself, not her mother, not anyone. Adrenaline filled her veins, and with the roar of a warrior, Rebecca threw herself at the rear door. It budged. The flashlight burned bright light as it sucked the phone's battery dry. All the power left was so precious, and if it went out, then so did Rebecca's chances twice more. She threw herself. She gave it her right shoulder, and then her left door flinched each time, but it refused to yield. A sliver of light had managed to leak in from the side. Both of her shoulders protested against another blow, so she lay on her back and with her feet she kicked and kicked. The battery fell to 2% of her feet each, especially her right ankle, as she felt her pain from earlier return in force. The pain didn't even slow her down. Regardless of how futile each kick was, she refused to stop. She was going to escape or die trying. She had no idea how true that statement was. One moved in the corner of the light, squeezing its way through the newly formed cracks between the door and the car. She didn't see it until it just about touched her leg. When she did, she instantly brought her knees to her chest, a thin mass a fleshy tentacle had. After they entered the car, it squirmed around blindly on the seat. It pulled itself forward with what looked to be a fingernail. The battery slipped to 1%. A noise came behind her. Turning her head, she found that she was surrounded by the other door. More tentacles were starting to wedge their way through the center of the seat, offered little solace as both sides grew closer. The glass behind her started to crackle as even more protrusions pushed themselves through the cracks. They pushed their way through shards of glass, carrying each piece with them at the end of their arm. They were coming for her, but she was done hiding. If anything, their intrusion only encouraged her. Now it was her and her mother's survival on the line. With her booted heels, she squashed the singular tentacle that had originally disturbed her space. It wriggled, pinned against the seat. She initially thought it was blood that leaked from it, but it came slow and viscous. It stuck to her boot like syrup. With a disgusted shriek, she pushed the tentacle to the floor and out of the way. The door had been pulled open by those things to let the tentacle in, and she saw her chance. She offered up a final double-legged kick. The flashlight went out, and with a final yell, lights flooded the car. She'd considered everything in the last several hours. Every scenario had danced through her mind like terrible daydreams. The memories of that man had fed most of them. She thought about the crunching beneath his feet and those terrible screams. She wondered what she'd find, but she was far more worried about what she might find her. She wondered what the world would look like once she escaped, and, to her disgust, nothing she imagined could compare to what she found. As soon as she'd kicked the door open and separated from the car, she suddenly felt like she was standing on an alien world. There was a loud crunch when her boots hit the ground. It felt like she was standing on well-packed snow. Those things covered every square inch below her feet. In fact, they stretched on for as far as she could see all around from horizon to horizon. The blobs dominated the landscape. It invoked thoughts of Mars in her head as there was no green to be seen anywhere. The color red stretched beyond her sight, seemingly into infinity. The land was rugged, and all the trees that she'd seen earlier along the sides of the fields were woebegone. The only major protrusions on the rugged landscape were where the solidified shells around the houses and cars still stood. They looked like they'd scabbed over most and remained upright. They spotted the landscape in every direction. The old man's house was still standing. The overhang of his porch had sheltered his front door from their barrage. The now dried hardened creatures seemed to form a cave around it. It was a relief to see that they hadn't reached everything. The silo had fallen. The pieces lay in a messy heap inside the house. The combined weight of the things must have proven too much for it. Rebecca hoped that her house had held better when she caught sight of the old man. She couldn't help herself, she shrieked. The old man was frozen on one knee halfway between her car and Mr. Sanders' truck. He must have been going to check on him the same as he had for her. When things get him. She saw it enter through his pant leg. A bundle of tendrils very similar to the ones that invaded her car snick up his pant legs down to his ankles where his skin was exposed. One had seemingly burrowed into his flesh. She followed the tendrils up like a snake. They coiled up his legs, they'd crawled along his body, and she thought she could see the tendrils branch apart under his clothes. They snaked around his body, but they all ended before they reached his neck. Blood soaked through parts of his blue buttoned shirt. The worst part was his head. It was forced back and held in place, and his mouth was agape, sprouting from it several dozen vein-like stems that ended in red plant-like petals. Rose towards the sky. Liquid circulated inside of them as if pumped in by the man's heart. The grotesque growth wouldn't have terrified her as much had it not been for the man's eyes. They were still open and they were looking right at her. Then came a single labored breath. He was still alive. She heaved, but her stomach offered nothing to expel the old man's feet. She saw a bulge in the ground and another bundle of sob flowers protruding from within. Rebecca knew that they marked Mr. Sanders' grave. If she could even call it that, was he too still alive under there was even possible? She prayed for mercy and for Mr. Sanders' forgiveness. She knew she didn't deserve it. No, she couldn't have imagined this. Not in her worst nightmares, whatever those things were. Had grown into a man through him. She let out another shriek. Loose as she saw his stomach twitch, the man grimaced as something moved inside of him. Rebecca wasn't sure if there was a worse fate. The old man, his eyes wide with fear, gestured down. It took several motions of his eyes for her to even catch it, but once she noticed, she followed his gaze down. She hadn't noticed them before, but little fibrous structures stuck out of the blobs. Each one was several inches tall. They looked like red ferns. A similar one was wrapped around the old man's ankle. Looking at her own feet, she'd noticed she'd stepped on one. The pressure from her boot had triggered one of the tentacles to slowly emerge from the blob below. She reached around blindly, unable to cling to the material of her boots. They weren't plants, they were snares. She nodded to the man and she thanked him. He didn't need to tell her for her to understand that it was imperative that she not let those extensions, those blood ferns, touch her skin. She didn't want to leave the old man. In fact, she offered to help, but he groaned in disapproval. Exerting himself, he managed to take her away with small motions of his hand through his stuffed throat. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Rebecca knew it was too late, so she went to his house again, forced to leave someone behind. A tear ran down the old man's cheek. It was like navigating a minefield, but she did it quickly and skillfully. The blood ferns were scary enough. Thankfully, if she stepped on one, her boots offered more than enough protection. The ground crunched like snow. Beneath her feet, when she stepped on something new, it caught her ear. The crunch she heard wasn't light like snow, but heavy like glass lifting her boot. She saw it embedded in the mass desensitization that kept her moving despite the appalling discovery beneath her foot. There was no mistaking it anymore. She knew she'd been right. She'd stepped on a watch through the cavernous MO of the blobs. She made it onto the porch and she found the door unlocked. The house was abandoned. As far as she could tell, she called several times to check, but no one responded. That made her incredibly thankful. She was still alone, but she didn't want anyone in that house to see what had happened to the old man. There was a picture frame hung skew on the wall. In it, the old man stood with his family. He was about 5 years younger in it, and his wife and 3 grown sons smiled at him. The eldest son sat with a toddler on his knee. He'd probably be about 8 now. She dreaded to even imagine it as a stroke of luck that the keys were on the counter, and an even bigger stroke of luck that the garage door had been left open. Inside sat a '98 Chevy with battered red paint. Rebecca looked at the path before her. The truck would hopefully do if those things couldn't stop her boots anymore. They sure as hell weren't going to stop a truck. They were dry, and that meant they could easily navigate. Hopefully. She hesitated getting inside the truck. She dreaded the idea that the rains would return, they would fall, and again she'd be trapped. This time she'd be without help and without hope, with a single calming breath. She pulled the door open and took her seat. The engine purred and it was the sweetest noise she'd ever heard. The terrain was bumpy at first, but she got used to it quickly. She set a course across the alien Earth. The road was lost beneath the surface of flesh, but Rebecca found her way. The houses, though covered, offered plenty in the way of navigation. They made the skeleton of her map memory filled in the rest of the atrocious, unspeakable landscape. She heard those plants had sprung up in unbelievable numbers. The rain must have infected anything that touched it. The larger the animal, the larger the plant passing a farm. She observed large bush-sized growths that sprouted from what used to be cows. They were buried now, but she'd passed them that morning. She was glad that most of the plants were covered. She'd rather not know whose grave it was, and she did see some terrible scenes during her journey. Cars were scarce, but she didn't find a single survivor in any of them. She slowed to check, but every car had at least one open door. No one had been able to claim refuge inside. Instead, they found themselves trapped outside. The lucky ones, the ones who weren't buried, could only watch as Rebecca drove by. One had been glued to the side of his minivan. His arm reached out, but she couldn't take it. There was a couple, a man and woman, that broke Rebecca's heart. The woman had gotten infected in the knee when she'd fell. Her husband's hand was frozen in place as it clenched the stems that emerged from her mouth. He tried to pull them loose, but those vines used that contact to ends. Snared him as well. They entered him through his wrist. They stared at each other. Neither even looked at Rebecca as she drove by. They were trapped by their love. The twisted machinations of her predicament were granted some enlightenment when she saw the helicopter. It was brought down into one of the fields, and around it stretched something surprisingly natural. It had etched out a crater around itself, a crater of dirt and fire. The fire caused by the collision had eaten away at the surrounding flesh. It had managed to etch out a radius, about 3 times longer than the helicopter itself. She couldn't believe the sight of dirt and fire would ever have caused her joy. It was good to see the things pushed back, to see them burnt and beaten. That feeling died when she saw the clouds swirl above an eye like at the center of a hurricane opened above. The winds picked up and threatened to pluck Rebecca's truck from the ground. Slamming on the brakes, she could only watch in awe at what happened next. From within the eye, 3 large shapes descended, blacker than the night. Tentacles of enormous proportions dangled from the clouds. Surely they were thicker than skyscrapers and twice as tall. They hovered over the spot where the helicopter had crashed, examining it. She couldn't breathe as one retracted into the clouds and its ends split open into 5 pieces. 5 fingers. She could only watch as, dare she say, a hand disappeared behind the sky and then reappeared grasping something. Massive pieces dropped from the hand like sand from a fist and splattered against the ground as the giant arm held its hand. Directly over the barren ground below, and then it started to release its hold like rain. Pieces of flesh fell from the sky and littered the ground. They covered the helicopter and they smothered the fire. Within moments, it was like there had never been a disturbance there at all. The thing above, pleased with his restoration, carried the remaining flesh in its grasp back into the clouds. The remaining 2 tentacles swung about the eye, surveying their monstrous masterpiece. One split its fingers apart and it tenderly brushed against one of the plants. It was a gardener tending to the garden. It was that sickening metaphor that brought Rebecca the greatest revelation: the rain. All the people infected. They were nothing more than fertilizer. The creature above retracted into the heavens and her eyes closed. Rebecca no longer begged God for help. She cursed his name. The drive took almost half an hour. The town she'd called home, her whole life, was deserted and lifeless. Thankfully, very few were stuck outside. She didn't even want to know how many of the obscured figures were friends, loved ones. She drove past. She hoped that most had found refuge inside passing stores. She witnessed the truth. The doors were shut, but those things had spread inside, and people stood trapped against the glass like tortured mannequins, with random movements danced by some of the windows, but she didn't dare stop. Her home was so close it was unrecognizable, once beautiful with 2 stories of yellow siding and a little stained glass rose in the front window. None of it could be seen beneath a disgusting layer of filth accumulated. Around it the death covered her house, and nothing was more sickening. That was what she thought until she got out of the truck and reached the back of the house. Grief was not strong enough of a word to describe how she felt after all she'd seen and after all she'd survived and fought for. It all led to this. There was only so much that she could have done. The fates had been cruel that day. Her mother was on her knees with a full water pitcher in hand. Her old eyes found Rebecca. They were green and still so bright. The vines hadn't taken hold completely, but Rebecca could see them moving only once. At that moment, she was always thankful for her mother's condition. Rebecca was glad she probably couldn't comprehend what was happening to her. She didn't seem to be in any pain, with the last energy of a beaten and broken woman. Rebecca fell into her mother's arms and hugged her. Her mother surprised her for one last time. "I love you," her mother said. It was all Rebecca needed. "I love you too," she replied. "You're right," her mother whispered into Rebecca's ear. "I don't think the plants even need this water." Rebecca managed the final laugh as the infection took hold. So guys, the video has ended now. If you like our stories and want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to Audible Odyssey channel and do all these things: like, comment, share, and subscribe. Enjoy horror and adventure stories like this. So just subscribe to Audible Odyssey. Bye bye.